think there's a really interesting test you should run. Go around and ask 30-year-olds if they'd rather have Bitcoin or dollars, and they'll all say Bitcoin. Ask 50-year-olds if they'd rather have Bitcoin or dollars, they all say dollars. I wouldn't watch.
Yeah.
I would participate. That is a much better world than the fiefdom world, the tribal world that we've had. It's not just win. It's just, this is a new society. And you want to get out in front of this new society. You want to be a part of this new society. Or do you want to be a Luddite? The Luddites died off, didn't they?
Mike Green here in Las Vegas at CryptoCon. I'm excited to sit down with Tim Draper. Tim has been a fixture in Silicon Valley for several decades, has invested in any number of household names that you're aware of, but I want to spend my time here talking with him about Bitcoin in particular and venture capital, how it's changed over the years. In particular, Tim has been really active in thoughts around governance and the idea of virtual communities, etc. I want to push a little bit on the ideas of how crypto can be a governing vehicle, how it can replace fiat currencies. And I'm really interested in what Tim's thoughts are on that. I hope you enjoy it as much as I know I'm going to. Tim, you're the closest thing to a scion of venture capital in Silicon Valley that exists. Third generation, and now you've brought your son Adam into the business as well. I guess your daughter.
And my daughter Jessie runs Halogen Ventures. She only backs women.
She only backs women. Yeah. Interesting. And now I want to talk about what you're doing with your children in venture capital, but let's talk very briefly about your background. So your grandfather.
Yeah, my grandfather was the first venture capitalist in the Silicon Valley ever. And my dad was a great pioneer of venture capital. He drove Silicon Valley forward in venture capital. And then I started venture capital 30-something years ago, and and my mission is really to spread venture capital and entrepreneurship around the world, because I've seen what amazing things it did for the Silicon Valley.
So that's actually, that's an interesting idea. So I'm a Silicon Valley native as well, actually. Have seen firsthand how that changed the environment. But one of the arguments behind the success of Silicon Valley is actually the concentration, the networking effect of people being face-to-face in Silicon Valley along Sand Hill Road, et cetera. When your father and grandfather were doing it, it was far less concentrated, but it was much more military in nature, right? It was tied to...
Well, my grandfather was a general, but my father was, military. He fought in Korea for a little while, but it wasn't military. It was more, I know a little bit about it because when I got started in venture capital, I would look for developments, new real estate developments, where I'd go in, and if one of the people leasing it was called something software or something technology or whatever, I'd knock on the door and see if they were interested in taking venture money. So it was a whole different world back then, and now it's just the opposite. We get deal flow from all sorts of people from all over the world, and we have to filter it to just those companies that are extraordinary or going after industries that really need transformation. And the best companies have this new technology that can be applied to a marketplace where that market is currently served by bad service, high cost, unhappy customers, but you have to deal with them because they're a monopoly. Or oligopoly.
So that's actually a fascinating insight, right? I mean, you come from an environment or a background where the capital was available and needed to seek out the ideas to one today where there's pitches flowing in the door, right? How does that change the industry and the dynamic? How does it change your role? How do you think about that?
Well, I think supply and demand constantly are in flux in the venture capital business. There are times when there's a lot of money available and not that many entrepreneurs, people willing to take the risk. And then there are times when there are a lot of entrepreneurs, like a new technology comes along like Bitcoin, and suddenly there are thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs who all say, hey, now I've got an idea and I want to go get some money. And it's interesting how the dynamic swings back and forth, either in favor of the entrepreneur or favor of the venture capitalist. But overall, we just tend to want to do deals that are fair, where both parties are happy, because it isn't like it's a quick hit and you go. It's more like when we make an investment, we're with them until the end, whatever the end may be. And so we want to align ourselves with the entrepreneur.
So when you think about that, and you think about there being thousands of entrepreneurs that have opened up in the Bitcoin universe, for example, right? How do you go through the process of vetting whether an idea, or what are you looking for in an idea in a nascent space that hasn't demonstrated its commercial potential in the same way as, say, social networks did post Facebook or even MySpace? How do you think about what you're actually looking for in a venture capital investment?
So we're always looking for an entrepreneur who is looking to transform one of those industries, but has a new technology or new way of looking at it. And it's something that entrepreneur was specifically, put on the earth for. It has to feel like this was meant to be. And another way to look at it is this unique enough to build a great, not just a business, but an industry around? And that is rare to come by. And so we filter through a lot of entrepreneurs who are doing things that are Me Too or something with a little twist. We're looking for a complete overhaul of an industry. So we look for new ways of doing things. So like this chair might have been, people might come to me and say, hey, I got a new kind of chair. But that isn't what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who says the idea of putting someone at rest and comfortable in a certain space. Maybe it's not a chair, maybe it's a floating device. Maybe it's something like you see in the Dune movie or something. We're really looking for those sort of transformative ideas. And that's why when we invest, half of them don't work. But we're encouraging people to go ahead and take those chances, because for society just moves forward much faster if people take risks.
When you highlight this idea of taking risk, right? And ultimately, that's what strikes me as unique about the U.S. model in venture capital, right? I mean, we take it for granted that people are allowed to go bankrupt, or that people are allowed to reinvent themselves, people are allowed to start all over again. In the history of the world, it's a relatively recent invention, limited liability corporations, and the idea of consumers and entrepreneurs being able to clear themselves of debt, late 19th century, right? Does the unique aspect of Silicon Valley, where so many people are capable of failing, do you think that's replicable in other areas of the world or in other regions?